All right, so we're going to talk about the investigative processes today. This means the steps of a crime scene investigation. So, like, if you were to get into the crime scene, what would you do? So, first off, just as cars need fuel to run, criminal laboratories also need evidence to run. Evidence can be what makes or breaks a criminal case. Evidence can be used to convict, exonerate, or prove a defendant to be not guilty of an accused crime, which you saw in the Innocence Project. Before evidence can be used, its presence must be recognized at the crime scene. Forensic science begins at the crime scene. If an investigator cannot recognize evidence or cannot properly preserve it for the laboratory examination, it's of no use. With proper training, police agencies and investigators can ensure competent performance at crime scenes. So, who is at the crime scene? So, police and possibly a district attorney, though the DAs usually are only there to do warrants, usually are not there at the crime scene to start. You've got the crime scene investigator. They document the scene in detail and collect evidence. You've got medical examiners, and that's only if there's like a death or something like that. They determine COD, cause of death. And then you have detectives. They look for leads, they interview people, they talk to the CSI. They're usually there on the scene first. And then you have specialists if it's needed, like entomologists, psychologists, anthropologists, and so on and so forth. So investigators are trained to follow. Scooch that down. Investigators are trained to follow certain steps to ensure that evidence is found, secured, and collected so that it maintains its integrity as it travels from the crime scene to the courtroom. There's a huge long gap in between the two. The chronological documentation or paper trail that records the sequence of custody, control, transfer, analysis, and disposition of physical or electronic evidence is known as the chain of custody. It chronicalizes. It means you know from start A to courtroom where it's been, who's touched it, what's been done to it. So what are the steps that the crime scene investigators follow? So there's 7 S's. So, first, secure the scene. Separate witnesses. Scan the scene. See the scene. Sketch the scene. Search the scene. Secure and collect evidence. The secure and collecting of evidence, not just the scene, because you've already done the scene. So securing the scene. The first officer arriving on scene of the crime must preserve and protect the area as much as possible. However, first priority should be given to obtaining medical assistance for individuals in need and to arresting the perpetrator if it calls for it. Once everyone is safe, extensive efforts must be made to exclude all unauthorized persons from the scene. Spectators, all that. Keep them back. Even the news people. Ropes or barricades along with strategic positioning of guards will prevent unauthorized access to a scene. Sometimes even the police do not cross. Tape doesn't work because people just go through it anyways. So you now have this log. This is part of securing it. Every individual who enters the scene must be documented. This is another like chain of custody type thing. You got to document the crime scene log as well as the time, the date they entered and exit the scene. And you can see that right there. Like who is it, when they entered, when they exited, and sometimes even what they're doing there. So separating the witness, that's the second one. So we're going to separate the witnesses. They can't talk to each other because you know that they can like collab and figure out what they're going to say. You want to keep that apart just so you can get authentic witnesses. Investigators will compare accounts. Witnesses are separated to avoid working together as well as avoid one witness to influence another witness. The following are questions that are usually asked of witnesses. What did you see? Where were you when you made this observation? There's that word, observation. Did you see anyone else? Did you have any information that may be helpful to our investigation? So next, the investigators must, and the first responders must do a quick scan of the scene and will mark any evidence they see with evidence markers. A more thorough search is done at a later time. So when they first get there, they scan the scene, and then they jot down real quick, they get the evidence markers and record what they got. The purpose of this step is to allow records of the scene to be made quickly and efficiently. During this step, a trained forensic photographer photographs the evidence that has been marked. Any new evidence is marked and photographs will be made. Because they may have missed something and the photographer would be like, "Ooh, what about this?" Or somebody comes up. So they make pictures of, or get pictures of that. We will look at the procedure for taking photographs at a crime scene at a later date and at a different time. Same with the scene. So sketching the scene, that's the next thing. Once the photographers have been have taken all the pictures they needed, and the crime scene investigator will sketch the scene. This is a rough sketch that depicts the dimensions of the scene and shows the location of the evidence. And you can see he's got rulers and everything. That's very, very important. The sketch should match the photograph and the evidence markers, and it should align with everything that's been already done. You don't want, like, hey, there's the evidence marker on this side, but in the sketch it's over there. You don't want that. You want it to look almost like a replica of what you're looking at. And we're going to look at that a little bit later too. Searching. During this step, investigators really focus on finding all the evidence, and a more detailed search is performed. So remember, the first time you look out, you do a quick search and look at the scene. And then later they come back. Well, this is the coming back. There's a search pattern that is declared. Again, we're going to look at this later. And they work together to ensure no part of the crime scene has been left unsearched. Like, every single inch of it has been looked at. If new evidence is found, it's marked. Evidence markers are put down there. The photographer comes back, and the sketch artist comes back too and starts sketching some more. Again, we're going to look at that a little bit later. Now you have securing the evidence. So physical evidence can be anything from massive big objects like a calculator, a cell phone, no matter how big or small. It could even be as small as, I don't know, I don't have anything really small, a piece of pencil lead. Like, all of that must be preserved in its original state as much as possible, and its integrity maintained. Each item should be handled carefully and wrapped separately to avoid cross-contamination. The search for the evidence is not limited to the crime scene. Evidence can be found on the body during autopsy. So there's lots of different places. You could have, like, the primary crime scene. You could have it on the person, on the person who did it. There's lots of different areas where evidence can be found. Investigators must handle the process evidence in a way that prevents any change from taking place from the crime scene to the crime lab. You want it as pristine as it was at the scene in the lab. The use of disposable gloves is vital during handling the evidence. Evidence should remain unmoved until investigators have documented its location, appearance, in notes, sketches, and photographs. I did want to get back to the gloves real quick with the gloves. So they don't just put one pair of gloves on. They put multiple pairs of gloves on. Why? Well, say you touch something, you then take your glove off and you have another one underneath, instead of having a glove on, take it off, oh, got to put another glove on, and so on and so forth. So they have layers of gloves on. Crime scene investigators have a large assortment of packaging materials and tools ready to package a diverse array of evidence. So you see right here, there's lots of gloves, different types of gloves. You have different types of bags, like plastic bags. You're going to have paper bags. You're going to have tins, like you're going to have these little glass things, lots of different materials, containers to be able to pick up different samples. So the chain of custody, this comes into the evidence part, is protecting evidence from the crime scene to the lab, and from the lab to the courtroom too. According to the chain of custody, evidence should be packaged in the following way. Appropriate packaging should be used. For instance, if you have a biological, you want it in a paper bag. That way it can breathe and dry out naturally, as opposed to a plastic bag where it could start to mold or something like that. Packaging should be sealed with evidence tape. You can see the evidence tape right there. And signature of the collecting officer should appear on that evidence tape. The seal must never be broken. So it has to maintain the whole time. It's got to be on there. It's not to be broken. Even if the evidence must be processed, the evidence must be removed without puncturing the signed evidence label. So it's got to be on there the whole time. You don't want to put a big old piece of tape right across the only opening. You want to make sure other people can get in there. A chain of custody log must be filled out. The signatures on the log must match the signatures on the evidence labels. So looking at this, they would have to write their signature right there. And some of them even come with their own logs. So the chain of custody log must travel with the evidence and should reflect anyone that had contact with that evidence. All right, so then you have this thing right here. In the event that you have something really, really tiny, and you're not going to use something like this big to collect it, but investigators will use bindles to secure the evidence. So a bindle is just a piece of paper folded up 4 ways like that. That is a bindle. Sometimes this is referred to the druggist fold. A bindle ensures the evidence isn't lost. So I would take it. My evidence would be in the middle. Fold it, fold it, fold it, fold it. And that way, it's secure in the midst of that fold. And you can see that right there. Once the evidence is collected, it can be transferred to the crime lab for further analysis. However, each person that handles that evidence must also put their name on the chain of custody. They must also place the evidence in a new package with a new seal so that the integrity, so the packaging can get a little bit bigger depending on how many people have touched it. So it could be in a little tiny plastic bag, then in another plastic bag, then in another plastic bag. Failure to do so will result in the inadmissibility of evidence in court. Big no-no. So on Friday, you guys are going to be completing the securing and packaging evidence close reading assignment. So you're going to go a little bit further into this. And I will explain the instructions on Friday. Besides that, I hope you guys have a great day.